From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Our Canadian border guards trying to limit free speech. An American journalist is outraged by what happened to her on the way to Vancouver last night. She was detained and questioned about what she was planning to say about the Olympics.
The Olympics? Well, not quite. The Democracy Now! Team was headed to Vancouver. I was giving a speech at the Vancouver Public Library on Thanksgiving. Canadian border guards detained and questioned us. We'll speak with David Eby of the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association and Christopher Shaw, a University of British Columbia professor and spokesperson for the No Games 2010 coalition. Then 10 years ago, the Battle of Seattle. On November 30th, 1999, tens of thousands of people from across the world shut down the World Trade Organization talks in Seattle. Police responded by firing tear gas and rubber bullets. Hundreds were arrested. On this 10th anniversary, we'll speak with the former police chief of Seattle, Norm Stamper, and two organizers of the protest, David Solnit, co-author of the story of the Battle of Seattle, and Ananda Tan of the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. And as the WTO convenes in Geneva 10 years later, we'll get a report from investigative journalist Greg Palast. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Washington Post reports as many as 9,000 Marines are beginning final preparations to deploy to Afghanistan. The extra Marines will be sent to Afghanistan soon after President outlines his new war strategy Tuesday during a speech at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Obama is expected to call for 30,000 to 35,000 new troops in a phased deployment over the next 12 to 18 months. Meanwhile, U.S. officials are pressing NATO for an additional 10,000 troops to augment the U.S. troop surge. In Honduras, a prominent supporter of the coup has won the nation's presidential election. Porfirio Lobo, a rich landowner, received 55% of the vote. The election comes 5 months after the Honduran military ousted the democratically elected President Manuel Zelaya. The leaders of Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, and other Latin American countries say Sunday's presidential election is invalid because it was backed by the coup leaders and could end any hope of Zelaya returning to power and completing his term, which is due to the end of January. But the United States has vowed to recognize the results. No pro-Zelaya candidate ran Sunday due to a boycott of the elections called by Zelaya. Human rights groups reported widespread abuses by the Honduran military and police ahead of Sunday's vote. In the city of San Pedro Sula, soldiers used water cannons and tear gas to break up a march by 500 unarmed protesters. On Saturday, 50 masked soldiers and police raided a collective of farmers and small-scale agricultural producers known as Red Comal. The Iranian government has announced plans to build 10 new uranium enrichment facilities in defiance of the United Nations. The decision came just 2 days after the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency backed a resolution censuring Tehran over its construction of an enrichment plant in secret. On Friday, the outgoing head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mohammad al-Baradei, said negotiations with Iran were at a dead end.
The agency has continued to verify the non-diversion of declared nuclear material in Iran. However, there has been no movement on remaining issues of concern, which need to be clarified for the agency to verify the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. It is now well over a year since the agency was last able to engage Iran in discussions about these outstanding issues. We have effectively reached a dead end unless Iran engages fully with us.
Swiss voters have overwhelmingly approved a referendum banning the construction of minarets on Muslim places of worship. The referendum was sponsored by two right-wing parties. Switzerland is home to some 400 Muslims and has just 4 minarets. A campaign poster in support of the ban depicted a woman in a burqa in front of a row of minarets shaped like missiles. Oxford University professor Tariq Ramadan, who's a Swiss citizen, said, quote, "The Swiss majority are sending a clear message to their Muslim fellow citizens. We do not trust you, and the best Muslim for us is the Muslim we cannot see." Amnesty International said the vote to ban minarets violates freedom of religion and will probably be overturned by the Swiss Supreme Court or the European Court of Human Rights. The White House has announced President Obama will briefly attend the UN Climate Summit in Copenhagen next week, near the beginning of the 2-week conference. Obama will stop in Copenhagen Wednesday, December 9th, while on his way to pick up his Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo. Obama is expected to outline a plan for the United States to set a provisional greenhouse gas emissions target for 2020 in the range of 17% below 2005 levels. Meanwhile, China has pledged to reduce its carbon intensity by 2020, but it has not promised to make any cuts to its actual carbon emissions. China is vowing to reduce the measure of carbon dioxide emissions per unit of production by as much as 45% by 2020. Ivo de Boer, the UN's top climate official, said the U.S., China, and other nations must take action in Copenhagen.
In just 11 days, the eyes of the world will be trained on Copenhagen to witness what I believe will be a historic turning point in the fight against climate change. And there is no Plan B for Copenhagen, only Plan A, and Plan A stands for action. Unseasonable storms in Asia and Latin America and protracted drought in Africa are already seriously harming people in the developing world. Success at Copenhagen will put the world on a safe, low-emissions growth path. It will open opportunities for clean growth, allowing developing countries to leapfrog the polluting technologies of the rich, industrialized world.
Eva de Boer also said the United States and other wealthy nations have a key role to play at the Copenhagen talks.
Rich countries must put at least $10 billion a year on the table to kickstart immediate action up to 2012. And they must list what each country will provide and how funds will be raised to deliver very large, stable and predictable finance going into the future, without constantly having to renegotiate those sums every few years. Particularly, the more than 100 least developed countries are entirely dependent on finance to adapt and reduce their emissions.
In other climate news, Indonesian police arrested 18 Greenpeace activists Thursday at a demonstration against the deforestation on the Indonesian island of Sumatra. The protesters had chained themselves to cranes at a paper mill. Rampant deforestation has made Indonesia the world's 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter, behind the United States and China. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered a partial 10-month freeze on West Bank settlements. The Obama administration praised Netanyahu's decision, but Palestinian leaders said it fell short of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas's call for a full halt to settlement construction as a condition for reviving peace negotiations. Netanyahu's plan has 2 major loopholes. Construction will continue on 3,000 previously authorized settler homes, and the moratorium does not apply to occupied East Jerusalem. Meanwhile, a pro-settler group has petitioned the Israel's High Court to stop Israel from enforcing Netanyahu's partial freeze on settlements. In economic news, the international world of finance was dealt a shock last week when Dubai announced state-run Dubai World may delay debt payments of nearly $60 billion. Earlier today, the Abu Dhabi stock index tumbled over 7%, but global stocks are steadying after the United Arab Emirates Central Bank promised additional liquidity to local banks. Britain's former ambassador to Washington has said George W. Bush and Tony Blair appeared to have converged on regime change in Iraq after talks at Bush's Texas ranch in April 2002, nearly a year before the U.S.-led invasion. Christopher Meyer made the comment while testifying before a British inquiry into the Iraq War. Meyer said the unforgiving nature of the military timetable for an invasion of Iraq in 2003 did not give time for UN weapons inspectors led by Hans Blix to do their job in Iraq.
We found ourselves scrabbling for the smoking gun, which was another way of saying, it's not that Saddam now has to prove he's innocent. We've now bloody well got to try and prove he's guilty.